is our last session, and as you've seen, we've sort of delved into sort of the specifics of how some of these things work, and kind of related to the food sovereignty topic we just talked about a little while ago. This one is about fire and sort of restoring indigenous ways to the landscape. And so we've got three really great speakers here to help us finish this one off. Ron Reed is with us. He's a traditional Karuk dipnet fisherman, spiritual leader, and cultural biologist for the Karuk tribe. Karuk, I should say. He comes from a prominent family of traditional spiritual leaders and cultural practitioners, is the father of 6 children. In his capacity as the Karuk tribe's cultural biologist, Ron has been an important tribal spokesperson about the cultural and health impacts of current river and forest mismanagement to audiences around the world, and works at home to restore Karuk culture and society through reconnecting people, especially tribal youth, to the natural world. Ron plays a critical role in increasing public awareness about the impacts of colonization on the spiritual and physical health of his people, the ecological integrity of the Karuk territory, and intersections between the two. He also works to foster collaborative research at the nexus of traditional ecological knowledge and Western science. Ron is co-author on over a dozen academic publications, and his work has also been featured in prominent news outlets around the world, including National Geographic, National Public Radio, High Country News, and many more. We also have with us Jesse Jackson, who is the Education Programs Officer for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians in Oregon. Jesse served as a building principal for grades 7 through 12 at Glendale Middle and High Schools. As a member of the Cow Creek tribe, he has worked hard to ensure equitable education to students in his schools in his tribe. He worked with the Oregon Department of Education to plan and roll out Oregon Senate Bill 13, has teamed with philanthropic foundations and organizations to remove barriers for rural students and families, and led community-based initiatives to provide support services and cultural and educational experiences. We know Jesse because we earlier this year did a wildfire workshop in Oregon, and Jesse was one of the Cow Creek Band's folks who took us to a place where the tribe has been has reintroduced fire to the landscape, and also bought back some of its land, bought back some land and expanded its reservation in some creative ways. So Jesse, welcome. And then our final speaker today, and that's not necessarily an order thing, but Dr. Carrie Marie Norgaard is a non-Indigenous professor of sociology and environmental studies at the University of Oregon. She's author of over 36 articles and book chapters in the areas of environmental sociology, climate change, Indigenous environmental justice, gender, and environment. I can send you a list of these titles. She chaired the section on environmental sociology of the American Sociological Association from 2018 and 19, is a founding member and secretary treasurer of the ASA section on Indigenous peoples and Native nations. She has worked as a consultant for the Karuk tribe on tribal environmental policy since 2003, and is here because Ron recommended her. So did we establish an order here? I'm not sure if we did, and apologies that I had to ask.
Elders first.
Well, that's me. Everybody else, who else? No. Go ahead, Carrie, you raise your hand.
I apologize. I have a slight complication. I'm picking someone up in the Portland airport, and I would use slides, so I'll need to leave. I'll be able to stay on the call and do questions, but in about 45 minutes, I should no longer be on my computer. So that's the only consideration that, yeah. And also I did send the slides, so Ron could use them independently, but I'll be a little bit better if I'm not doing it from the road. That's all.
So, okay. So does everybody agree Carrie should go first? Ron, are you cool with that? Jesse's cool with that?
Kari's shaking her head no.
No, I'd rather
All
like
right.
if Ron would start, I mean, I think,
And
yeah,
then
I
we
Well,
can
the
probably.
do that.
youngest first.
Okay.
No,
Wait,
I don't, I'm
okay.
definitely not, I'm not willing to speak first, but I could go second, and with
Well-
apologies to Jesse, if that feels rude,
I think that sounds good to us, and we
Yeah.
should be able to, yeah, we
Yep.
can hit that deadline. So,
We can. All right. Thank you
All
all
right.
for working through that.
Okay, we got that settled.
Yep. Take her away, Ron.
Okay. Ayuki Hutkich. My name's Ron Reed. My Kaduk name is Imkaka. I'm named after a ceremonial person that where I preside over today at Inam. Again, my name's Ron Reed. I'm a Kaduk tribal member. I'm a dip net fisherman at Ishipishi Falls. I'm a ceremonial leader of world renewal at Inam called Pikiawish. Thimthal Pikiao is we fix the world, we renew the world every year with the use of fire. And so that really encompasses the physical, the mental, the psychological relationship with the land, our non-human relatives, and the spirit of all of the things mentioned. I am I guess I'm an Indigenous knowledge advocate, and I have learned that by way of my ancient family. My first memories are of ceremonies, world renewal ceremonies, which my grandpa presided over at Inam, and fishing down Ishipishi Falls, clubbing, packing fish out for the elders, for the community, for the ceremonies. And we drifted away for a few years, but my initial teachings allow me to be here today. So I think that's very important to know that, a lot of these things aren't available to us, but a lot of these things are, because 1850 was the kind of the traumatic moment for California Indians. And that was the California Gold Rush. And we weren't really contacted until 1850. So we have a lot of our ceremonies in place. We have a lot of our language being revitalized. We've been doing some really magnificent work with academia and folks that maybe I'll get into a little bit later. But, I think that what it is Indigenous knowledge. It's been a very tough road. And I would just say that being an Indigenous knowledge advocate, it pertains to, my inherent responsibility of the ceremonies to my family and my non-human relatives. And I do that by being, a provider and a protector for my family. And it's not, back in the day, that's all you had to do, really, be able to provide and protect. But now there's a whole new element called Western science, the modern world. So we have to be able to maneuver in both worlds. So I think that's the reason why I'm asking Kari Norgard to take time out of her busy schedule to kind of put some emphasis in a technical aspect so you folks can really grasp the understanding of what I am talking about, but then what you guys need to hear. Two different things. I've been an advocate for Indigenous knowledge my whole life, but it's just been recently with the work of Dr. Kari Norgard that my voice has been heard. So since the relativeness of her being here, so I think that has really allowed me to become who I am today, Indigenous knowledge advocate. We did that, and Indigenous knowledge has taken me to the Klamath hydroelectric dam relicensing as the tribal lead. I utilize Indigenous knowledge to push the environmental natural resource envelope of taking all of their cultural resource aspects of the Kaduk people, the stereotypical, and put them in each management category. Water quality, fish, terrestrial animals, plants, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to be at every one of these meetings, took a lot of exhaustive time, but to be able to express the Indigenous nature of natural resource management, the intergenerational transfer of wealth, and the use of fire is necessary to understand the ceremonies to a certain degree, to be able to understand the circle of life that is being offered and being actually being managed for. With the newfound interest in Indigenous knowledge in my lifetime, I'll say that has allowed me to become a national indigenous knowledge advocate, starting with Federal Resource Advisory Committee under the Secretary of Agriculture back, I don't know, in the 2010s sometime. TEK was the subject matter that I was providing to that group. Right now, then also, that also allowed me to be the tribal lead, like I said, in the hydroelectric licensing, which led me to Dr. Kari Norgard with denied access to traditional foods, really put the technical element where people tried to start listening to a group of people accusing the federal government of impacting the health of a group of people because of the federal project. Big news, big words, and it had huge impacts that we're still working on today. That allowed me to create the Kaduk Tribe UC Berkeley Collaborative under Indigenous knowledge, come and quantify Kaduk management perspective so we can all talk on the same page and understand each other. And really the goals and objectives of that was for the cultural practitioners to be talking to the doctorates. We got a long way. We're still cruising on that wave as well, because all these things are very relative to the modern management element of trying to make things better. And then the collaborative rolled into a food sovereignty grant, multi-million-dollar, multi-tribe, multi-state, multi-county. It was a huge, highly competitive grant. We did a really great job with that. We did such a great job of bringing back traditional food sovereignty. We just rolled that into our climate adaptation plan, climate change adaptation plan that the Kaduk Tribe is recently doing. So currently, I've been working on the national level with the co-production of knowledge of the Office of Science and Technical Advisory of the Indigenous Knowledge. I've just been appointed on the UC Berkeley Chancellor Native American Advisory Committee, Indigenous Knowledge. I've just been appointed to the Cultural Advisory Board at Cal Poly Humboldt, Climate Change Assessment Plan. And that leaves me time with my hobby, and passion, which is fire. Indigenous fire is the indigenous life cycle. So I think that's kind of like, I crammed it all in right there, had a few notes for you all, and there you go. That's my little offering for the day.
Thanks, Ron. Jesse, you want to go or do we decide on Kari? I'm sorry.
Like crap, that's a hard one to follow, you know. I'll speak for just a second and just kind of introduce myself and then let Kari go, because I know she's limited on time and she's kind of tagging off of Mr. Reed. First, I just want to take some time to honor my relative from the South at Kaduk. You know, there's a lot of differences in tribes, and so I don't make a lot of generalizations between them because I want to be respectful. But this brings up a lot of emotion for me, because my grandfather was one of our early chiefs, and he worked directly with the Karuk to help them get their recognition, because like us, they're a tribe that has a lot of traditionalists, a lot of cultural practitioners, as Mr. Reed said. And that is, I really have a lot of respect for that, but I think people in Indian country know the uphill battle that those kind of tribes face. And it's a real big shame when this whole country is looking for an answer that comes from the people that lived here for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. And I could keep saying that for at least 15 to 16 more, and that will only get enlarged by the archaeological record. So it is a real travesty what was lost in our traditionalists on these lands. And I want to honor the people that take on the heavy load of really trying to be a traditionalist in a tribe that doesn't always agree side to side, in a county that doesn't see eye to eye, in a state, in a nation, in a world that doesn't see eye to eye. So the importance of the subject matter that Mr. Reed is talking about, I hope people really understand the heaviness of what we're talking about. I don't know if anybody besides Adam and sorry, I forgot your name. Dave. I don't know if anybody else besides Adam and Dave was here when we came and did the Cow Creek journey with us last time. One of the sites I brought people to, and Adam and Dave are going to hear this for the first time, was our grandmother tree. And that grandmother tree we visited months ago, and she was over 800 years old, and now she's burned to the ground, and it's a really, really sad sight for me to go to. And it's going to be visceral for me for a lot of years. And that's a perfect example of how we have poor fire and unhealthy environments that aren't being managed, and it's creating real damage. And for those of you, if you were on that tour, you know how I value our tree relatives, and that loss for some was just viewed as a natural resource loss. And for me, it's a loss that is going to take many years for me to overcome. And that's a real good example of the difference of our worlds and how far we have to go to really make the connection. So that's going to be my intro. I'm Jesse Jackson. I'm the Education Programs Officer for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. I'm the grandson of Susan Nanta. I'm the grandson of Dolly Larson. I'm the grandson of Grandma Retha. I'm the grandson of Charles Jackson, late chief of the Cow Creek tribe, and I'm the son of Roger Jackson. And I represent the few of the Cow Creeks that were not rounded up and put onto our reservations or killed or died in the Rogue Wars defending our brothers down to the south. And it's my honor to be here today with you all to share the perspective of just one person and one family that has cared about the environment for a long time and has really tried to continue passing down knowledge in ways so that TEK in our indigenous way of life does continue.
Thank you, Jesse.
Wow, thank you, Jesse. That's very powerful, and just really appreciate your sharing that story. And I'm sorry about her. I'm sorry for that. My name's Kari Norgard. It's definitely an honor to be here. the things I'll share are definitely things I've only come to know because of the trust and relationship primarily with Ron Reed over the last 20 some years we've been working together. And, I just want to make clear as well that, our work has, and the fact that he's speaks so generously and kindly of me. It's all about the racism and colonialism, right? That this would be necessary. And it's an honor for me. And it's been a beautiful thing to have the relationship to work together. But that is the context that we've come together in. And I also want to congratulate whomever it was that reached out to Ron. I think this is the first time that someone has reached out to him. Well, I know people reach out to you as well, but very often what happens is people reach out to me because I'm easier to find and so forth. And they want me to be the spokesperson. And then I say, well, no, actually that needs to be done with Ron. Yeah, so I do have, I did put together some slides that I think could be useful. And basically Ron and I will speak together about some of these just points. And, where he left off, Indigenous fires, Indigenous lifeways is kind of, I think, just telling that story with some photos in some different ways, again, sort of coming back around to that because things are so connected. So I think I need to be a request to turn on the screen. Sorry, I didn't notice before to share my slides.
I
now I
believe
can.
you're a co-host, so you
Okay.
should have a green share square down at the bottom.
I do, but it says sharing is not turned on. Oh, now I think I can. Now I can. Now we got it. Okay, thank you. Let's see. I think I have to do this before I can put it into presenter mode. Yeah, so I mean, Ron, you and I just go back and forth. I think, Ron has maybe seen this particular iteration, but basically sort of we've spoken together over different years. Our original work was that Ron alluded to was related to the Klamath Dam relicensing and very much were the first people to put in the federal process to say that a dam was giving them artificially high rates of diabetes. And that made the front page of the Washington Post back in 04 or possibly 05, I forget when. And that was a big deal. And it was really a combination of the traditional Western science that did that. And then ever since, our work has had a strong emphasis on health and culture as tied to the landscape, but for fire. So here I just put, so I think I imagine everyone in this room understands that that fire are part of how landscapes across Oregon, California, many, many parts of the world, and some more than others perhaps, are fire adapted. And excuse me, in particular, in the Karuk case, this is bear grass. This is Kathy McCovey with a bear grass skirt, and also showing burning bear grass. And there's been more and more attention to understanding that from like the fire ecology side, that fire is needed for ecosystems and that fire suppression has been problematic. But one of the things that it feels to me, and I think Ron experiences as well, and you'll hear it in a minute reps from Ron directly, is that there's so much less understanding of how fire is a cultural process and related and important for so many different cultural processes. And so this is a few slides. This is one of Ron's son, Jason, burning. And so just, less value about the importance of fire for knowledge. And Ron, I don't know if you took a peek at these slides or where you'd like to jump in, but yeah. Oops, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think that, really indigenous fire is indigenous lifestyle. Indigenous hydrology is the whole element that puts people connected with the landscape through the great creator, because we follow directions from the ceremonies, and the guidelines are our creation stories. So the information that is put on the landscape when you're applying fire is intergenerational knowledge that hasn't been passed down now for how many generations? For us, it's been 150 years. So how many generations are there that there's been a sense of emptiness, a helplessness, the anxiety is overwhelming with all these different things that are happening. So I think these are the things getting fire back in the landscape so integral to the health and wellness of our people. K through 12 curriculum, right? Social problems, all these different things. Now, the best available science tells us that the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma, the boarding schools, and forced assimilation, we need to be back in our landscape practicing again. So those are the elements that I think scientifically valid things that we like to talk about. And I think there needs to be more work technically on these things so it becomes streamlined through the public.
We were in your backyard when you started talking about this term, social management, Karuk social management, and similar to what you said, but just, please.
I'll just say, it's health and wellness. Our ceremony is about health and wellness, not only the environment, but to our people. The intergenerational knowledge that you transfer down through your people is in particular connected to your specific watershed. That's the watershed my people have walked through, put fire on throughout time. Our creation stories are right there. And so it's my obligation through forced assimilation, to be able to navigate through the world we have now with indigenous knowledge from my ancient family, but then also as guides such as colleagues like Dr. Kari, or some other folks, a lot of other folks that help me. The Civil Diver, there's Tom Carlson and Jenny Sourwine. There's so many people that I'm gonna stop right there. Dan Sorn, there's so many dang people that kind of like have put words in my mouth, help me tell this story. But the whole thing is finding role models for the next generation to look up to be able to take this path. I'm on a very good path right now, but I'm not on a role model path. I'm on a stubborn, I'm going to get this thing taken care of at all costs, and nobody wants to do that. I don't want anybody to do that. So I sent my sons or my children to school. 4 out of the 6 children have degrees. My youngest son is down in Berkeley right now as we speak, working on his master's dissertation on the Pacific Northwest Amendment Plan. So we're kind of like hitting on all, full throttle on both sides of the aisle. But now one of the biggest things that I want to talk about here in the future is the economic equities of this knowledge transfer. Or I should say co-production of knowledge.
Another one of Ron's sons, Ronnie. So, I don't know, do you want to say some things about, so I have a few slides, fire is culture, fire is food, fire is medicine. Sounds like a prior session was about food sovereignty. You've made the point that without fire, forests become food deserts. Why is fire food?
I think that indigenous fire is indigenous hydrology. Water makes the world go round. And when we go and put fire under a basketry, we go put a fire of materials, we go put for the food for terrestrial animals. All these things are building water. And that's the reason why you have fire on one side of the paradigm and fish on the other. Those are our monitoring tools. So in between, you take care of your fire, you take care of your fish, or you monitor with your fish. That tells you how everything in between is happening. So, fire is the teacher, the oldest teacher on earth. When we're building basketry material, we're putting food out there in the landscape for the animals. There's multiple objectives with our indigenous fire. So we have these landscapes that we manage maybe 10% of the landscape, and everything else was kind of like, we'd go burn them and stuff like that, but you protect, you put fire resiliency. That's exactly what the Kuduk tribe's doing now, leading the nation, prescribed fire with cultural objectives to get back to mimic nature so we can stop the catastrophic wildland fire or start getting some kind of understanding of fire itself. It's not all bad fire.
So I think people mostly understand, but here's a letter from Orleans, California, which is where the Kuduk DNR sits, from the Forest Service District Ranger at the time in 1918, talking about killing people for their traditional spiritual practice of using fire. So we think about like the way that the crisis that our landscapes are in now as directly intertwined with genocide, with colonialism, not just in the past, as is clear with these really disturbing, and I should perhaps mention sort of trigger warning before showing this letter, but with colonialism today as well. And so people who are working on trying to get these cultural practices back face an uphill battle of colonial narratives of whose knowledge matters, of how to understand the world, of ability to communicate, of the idea that non-native people could just be starting to put fire in the landscape and that would be acceptable. Lack of awareness of how it's underwoven with sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, so many more things. But for sure, it's important to understand that the reason that we have fire suppression and the practice of fire suppression has been intimately linked with genocide. And Ron, I sometimes have used a really powerful quote from you about what it's like and what it means when people can't go back to a landscape. Like this is a very overgrown place. Near Orleans, I don't remember. I'm at Carrick's place. I don't know exactly where it is, but and I've used this sometimes next to a passage that you shared with me on the phone one day, just about like all of the reasons why this is a problem. And I don't know what you feel like speaking about now, if anything, but.
Yeah, I just, it's like our whole indigenous sense of well-being is suffocated. We're not able to put good fire back on the landscape. We don't get the foods. We don't get the honor of giving our first foods to our ceremonies, to our elders. So it's leaving you with a very vacant, hollow place in your heart. And you're not able to teach to your children not only the application of fire onto the landscape, but the meaning of life, the meaning of life over time. The sustainability of our worldview depends on fire. And when we were unable to go out and harvest our acorns, you're losing that element of your culture. And when you lose your basketry element, you lose all these different elements. It's very hard to recapture the integral meaning of the medicine, of the words, of the prayers, of the existence of indigenous people. So, like basketry for material. In the 70s, we didn't have hardly the basketry material, the women didn't have very good basketry materials. So they looked not very good. They weren't attractive. So it looked like our basket weavers weren't good, but it was the materials. So there's a direct connection of how the creator tells you to put it down on earth and how you're supposed to follow all those steps. And if we don't follow all those steps, there's a vacancy. And within the colonial violence right now is a stereotypical well-being of me supposed to know everything about fire. I'm supposed to know everything about interconnectivity and things like that, but I come through a shattered existence where my grandmother or my grandfather or my mother learned the pristine medicine of the Cut people, but it was cut off very quickly through forced assimilation. So that's the colonial violence in the landscape that is directly contributed to the lack of good fire in the landscape.
And I also just want to acknowledge, Ron's speaking about really, really heavy things, and he's being asked to do so in order to explain, these things. But I just really want to acknowledge you and your heart for the work that you do. And as I'm listening to you, especially thinking about the heaviness of boarding schools or so-called boarding schools.
I wouldn't be doing marginalized indigenous communities justice if I just kind of like jumped on the bandwagon and say, "Hey, good fire, we're gonna take this up to and do everything we can with it and forget about everything." But it's not about that at all, because there's a lot of people that are still struggling for this identity that I'm talking about and thriving for. My children are going to be flourishing here before long. They're flourishing now. But what about the other 18 tribes in California, along with the Cut people that have an unratified treaty? We're talking land back. Have you noticed I haven't said one thing about land back yet? I need my spirit back, ladies and gentlemen. I need something that really is meaningful to me to be able to make meaningful steps with my children before I can go out and help communities. My ceremonies have a way of allowing me to do that. My brothers and sisters up and down the state, up and down the coastline don't have that ability to do that. So that's why I'm here. I'm here not only paving the way for my children, but for people that are interconnected to this great resource called Mother Earth. And the more we're connected, the more we're heard, the better off we're all going to be. So I really appreciate everything that you're saying, have done, Kari, because without any of this, without our initial conversations, I'd probably be self-medicated somewhere. The Yotua.
So, just, what Ron was speaking about, the connections of all of this to mental health, but just to make it explicit that, that fire back, is about, the health of the landscape is so connected with people's spiritual health, people's mental health, connected with political sovereignty, because it's about keeping the landscape such that you can continue to access traditional accustomed places, to access those traditional accustomed resources and all of those kinds of things, even though Karuk do not have a ratified treaty.
So when we'll clap, we'll rub our hands together for good luck, for prayer when you're praying. I was praying up the watershed about how fire is needed. I don't know how many years ago that, Kari, was. But this year we just put fire on the floodplain. We're putting prescribed fire up in the watershed. and I have a dissertation coming from Berkeley shortly with water quality monitoring with the use of good fire in the T-Bar watershed. So, I think that just this vision has been allowable because of both knowledge systems being able to talk to each other. A tribute to Kari, a tribute to the collaborative, the Berkeley collaborative, and ongoing work I'm doing with Stanford and Cal Poly. So those are the things that allow this voice to be amplified. And that's the only way we can be heard at this point.
So I wanted to maybe close with one more theme, which is Ron and I have been doing climate work together for, I guess, at least a decade now. And early on in the time of that, I think again, up in the fisheries building, I had my recording on as I try to do. And Ron shared these words about the political moment that we're in and the opportunity that he felt existed in the context. And as a way, one of the things that I've stressed, my first work on climate change was on climate denial and the sense of paralysis that so many people feel, but especially privileged people feel, and really noticing the contrast of the way that Ron and many people on the river are just leaning into whatever work they feel needs to be done. And this way that it can reframe climate change as an opportunity, albeit not denying the severity of the situation that we're in.
I think indigenous communities are, we've had a lot of a troubled history and a troubled past. And because of our worldview, it's because of our ideology, we still exist today. We're still putting fire on the landscape or fighting to do that, still being stubborn on the things that, sometimes we don't understand, so fire is that opportunity. Right now, I was taught a long time ago that unless the public knows about it, or you're not going to have a problem. So fire is that problem. Uncle Sam is now broke. It's not because of a newfound knowledge system that, we can lean on. No, Uncle Sam is broke. Now it's time to figure out who's connected to fire. Indigenous communities, good fire. They say there's good fire. Well, let's find it. But we cannot make the same mistake. Indigenous tribal leadership cannot make the same mistake as we did in previous extraction eras, because we've been able to extract along with extractors, but then when that money leaves, we're not able to take care of ourselves. Fire is an opportunity to get back and get our resources available to us so we can teach those things. So make me healthy grandpa, makes a healthy the parents, and more importantly, the next generation knowing the natural sciences, knowing the water quality issues, knowing about wildlife, the fisheries, water, all these different things from a different perspective that you can build on in Western science. So fire is an opportunity for the future, and we're taking it, and we're doing the best we can. We pray with it, and by the way, fire makes water. My grandbaby, her name's Ishaha. So that's kind of like that's the beauty of who we are and how we kind of put important things in our daily lives.
So in the Karuk Tribe's climate adaptation plan, there's a lot of really specific ways that fire is being proposed or being drawn upon. And so encourage people to check out this document. It's being used as a model other places. It's available on the Karuk Climate Change Projects.org. I think it's just a WordPress site. One thing that's been happening, I just wanted to, Ron shares a lot of knowledge that might not be clear. I always, every time I listen to you, I learn more. But he took me a long time to understand what he was talking about in terms of the hydrology cycle. So when fire is put on the landscape, it actually has an effect in the rivers. And so this is one document, an image from that document showing that relationship. And also there's a Western Science article that Frank Lake is a co-author on, but multiple people that's also looking at data sort of illustrating that for Western audiences as well. But essentially, when you are burning, it's very good for rivers and very good for fish, and very, very important, not only for the forest ecosystem, but for the aquatic ecosystem. And I think I had a few more things, but I think that that's, unless you want to say something about smoke as environmental justice issue, otherwise, okay, I think we'll let Jesse, we'll turn the floor to you, Jesse, and I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but then I'm going to I'll join back in from my phone. So thank you. Yotva.
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you,
Thank you, Kari.
Oh man, a lot of really great passionate information there. I want to thank you both, Kari and Ron. We could listen to you guys for a long time. I've just been making notes, so I'm just going to kind of go off my notes and like really no specific order. I really like the way Ron is portraying multiple subjects here. For me, I was taught by my grandfather, when we're preparing for healthy fire to be on our landscape the following year, it really begins with our high water mountain ceremony in the fall. And that balance that Ron is attesting to is everything. I want to start with the concept that we talked about when we interviewed last time, if some of you were there, that the earth does not belong to us, that we belong to it. And so there is a constant theme that Mr. Reed continues to say. He talks the word connection. And that's really important for us, because it isn't about the actions. The actions are hollow without the connection. And we were really segregated from our connection. So, one thing, and I know our tribe has work to do with this, along with a lot of other tribes. I noticed that prescribed burn manual at the bottom said Creek Natural Resources. I think, the world's going to get to the point where all natural resources are cultural resources, right? There's no natural resource anybody can name that's not a cultural resource. He talked about getting his spirit back. That's that connection. We don't want to go forward doing stuff and going through tasks that are hollow. We have to have our connection. And when we have our connection, then we're aligned. I appreciate the scientific deal that Kari just showed. But we don't know what we don't know. And I would also say that there's a cultural connection component in why fire and water need to be with each other that hasn't been scientifically quantified yet, or might ever not be scientifically qualified. So it's really important for us to have those connections, and it's those connections that enabled us to really be the stewards of these lands that we were since time immemorial. I know for me personally, I've been fortunate enough to I inherited homesteaded land up in the woods that my grandfather had, and they're in the same lands of my grandmother's and where our tribe was pushed to in the end. And so I have been able to gain knowledge and have continued burning my whole life. I've been able to burn my whole life. I left for a few years and then had to go back and take care of Grandpa until he passed away. I returned to burning to Grandpa's property when I came back after being gone for 10, 15 years, going to school and doing life, getting my wife, building my family. I was the craziest person in the woods when I started burning again up there. People had forgotten. And so I was the guy that was going to burn everybody's houses down. Now I'm the guy that everybody's coming to, right? Because now we're starting to see a lot of energy put into burning. I'm happy to report in Oregon that the Oregon State University Extension Service has collaborated with the Oregon Department of Forestry to offer this new prescribed burn manager course. I went through that course. Actually, part of that is cultural burning. It's a small component of it. I really hope that we're growing that. I've been teaming up with people like Chris Adlam from OSU Extension, Amanda Rao from Oregon Department of Forestry, and really trying to put that culture into the fires for prescribed burning so people can understand that component. We did one in Oakland, Oregon, about a month and a half ago. And we were able to have a cultural burn there with a cultural component, right? And I like to think that the people there had a connection to the landscape and to the fire and with each other that they hadn't had before, and many of them were career firefighters. So, when we talk about burn culture, of course we have traditionalists that are trying to continue or revitalize the ways of the past, but there's also a contemporary burn culture that's emerging also, and I really hope that as contemporary society, and namely the governmental agencies, start to go down those routes, that our traditionalists are incorporated with them as much as possible to really bridge that gap and to kind of build what the new burn culture is going to be for all of us, because that's kind of what's on the horizon. But I have a firm belief that whether it's environmental problems, any environmental, whether it's water, air, most of the contemporary problems that we face on these lands can almost always be exclusively answered by the ways of the people that lived here since time immemorial. The older I get, feeling this need to end all of human suffering and the need to draft the human manifesto so that everybody can figure out how the heck to live together, well, I think 98% of that manifesto would be based off of the ways of the indigenous people. And it's really important to understand that the burn culture of my people, and I'll just speak for my people on this, that the burn culture of our people at time of contact was an evolved way that it evolved over many, many years. And it didn't look the same every 5,000 years before that. In fact, it looked much different. That's the answer to why the travesty of what we lost is so big. It's not just that we lost information. We lost the refined information that had been handed down and perfected over many, many, many years or since the beginning of time. Very specific prescriptions on every single part of our natural environment for us to maintain our connection and for us to continue our symbiotic relationship in a sustainable manner. It really is psychotic how bad we're all living today versus how good we could be. For me, we lived in a dichotomous realm where we came together in larger familial groups and tribal groups and lived in larger plank houses. And in the winter, we were with each other and we did things that took many hands. And we didn't have a lot of depression and things like that during that time because we had each other. And yes, after being with each other for a long time, it was time to get up to the woods and split up and get a little bit of space and enjoy all that awesomeness in the summertime, where we all came together, our brothers from the Rogue Valley and our North Dekelmans, our Keeper of the Rock, the Upper and Lower Dekelmans. Our origin story has everything to do with the Rogue Valley and those Table Rocks, the Upper Brother Dal Dal and the Lower Brother Dal Dal. And that we came together in the summertime to take care of our elders, that we had an entire valley that was for our elders. And then our able bodies would go up to Huckleberry, would go up to Falls, would take elders to someplace, but would make sure that those elders were taken care of for the entire summer until we had our 5-day ceremonial fire in the fall, where we put fire back on the landscape and were taken care of by the Creator because we'd done our job and done our high water mountain ceremony so that the circle was complete. I didn't expect this to be so visceral and emotional today for me. I didn't know who was coming on here. I want to say, Mr. Reed, you're my type of speaker, someone that speaks from the heart, and I believe every word that I heard. I can smell the truth, the ring of truth, right? And I'm really glad that you're not somewhere self-medicating right now instead of being with us, because myself and a lot of other people could say the same thing. And it is really hard to continue to come to bat and fight for a world that others don't value or don't see. But I refuse to jump into the crap pile. A wise man once told me that unicorns recognize cobwebs. And I really, I feel like in 1,000 years, the people who have their hearts that were fighting for environmental justice, that we're doing work that isn't appreciated as much right now. In a long time, I feel like we're the most important people of our society. And so I really support everybody for being here today. I want to honor everybody for hearing these words. It's every day we have the option to take a look around us and to let what is in front of us and powers that are out of our control to kind of have us stop fighting or start condoning ways that might not necessarily, I know for me, align with my heart. And I feel like for our other speakers probably say, I'm here representing a lot of people that are gone and not with us anymore, but that I learned so many crucial lessons from, that I cannot move forward without representing them and representing the ideology of trying to get us back in balance. I really mean, it's psychotic how bad we're living right now. And I'm an anthropology guy. Food and sex are the drivers for all species. As long as people are doing both of those pretty well, then I guess everything's good. I can see a world more than that. Our tribes had a world more than that, where they didn't just eat and have intercourse good. They did a bunch of other stuff awesome. The plight of the Indian, one of the worst things I hate as we've gotten into the digital revolution now. And people look back on these traditional ways, but oh man, you guys, had to make your clothing, and we talk about the foods in fire. Medicine and foods in our language, it's the same word. So, Hippocrates, father of medicine in Greek culture, right? Like food is our medicine. We've known that for a long time. That's the word we got. And when we burn, you do two things. You get rid of the non-native species and you bring back the native species, food and medicinal plants. So I'm going to be burned until I die. I'm really happy that the legislation is supporting stuff and I'm not risking jail as much anymore. I think it's really important for our children. One of the biggest parts of our tribe and one of the biggest travesties of Smokey the Bear is putting that negative connotation into people's minds of fire, having them trying to work against it, and stopping our children from developing the relationships with fire. Fire is my religion. And that Mother Earth creator dichotomy is really dependent on us. We believe that, we do that water ceremony for the creator to help us with water. We get to control the fire on the landscape. And we want to keep that balance. We want to keep that balance. We had it since time immemorial. It's time to come back. For me, after losing the grandmother tree, I have to get to where we're having healthy fires back on our landscape so that we can avoid these horrific fires that are nuking, for lack of a better term, the natural environment behind me, the mountains that I've grown to love my whole entire life, which for the rest of my life will not look anything like it has for forever. The fire that came through is so hot. It's so bad. I know some of you have been to those where everything's black. The soil looks kiln burned. The humus in the soil is completely gone. And it's a desert. It's a desert in the greenest place on earth. And it's really, really sad. It's hard for me not to react in a negative way because it affects me so much. But in Spanish say aquí estamos, right? Here we are. So there's a group here in Douglas County called Umpqua Watersheds. They really fight for our natural environment. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Oregon stuff right now, but there was I gotta mention her. I gotta mention this woman that just passed away while visiting the Dorner Fur over on the coast here in Oregon. 2 days before Thanksgiving. She's from my alma mater. Her dad was an FFA teacher, pretty conservative guy. She went to college as the oldest daughter to get into agriculture. Somewhere along the way, she became an environmentalist. And then she became a teacher at a local school. Her name was Emily Hopfer. And honestly, I'm researched on, and she's not even native, but she's from these lands. And I have a really firm belief that if you're on this land and you love this land, then the native line's real shallow there. And she's kind of reinvigorated the memory to fight for this natural environment. And so I'll take love and education and kindness from wherever it comes. And I am going to be represent Emily Hopfer and the Hopfer family in the fight to make sure that we're valuing our natural environment, especially our trees, our second oldest relatives, we believe, next to the stone relatives. And I want to honor her memory. I thank you for hearing me today, and I thank you for allowing me to say Emily's name, because there are people that have she was going to have a lifetime of work. And here in Douglas County, there's a lot of dogma here in Douglas County. And so I really recognize the soldiers that come from within. And we lost one. So, but the work's not over. Again, I want to thank everybody for here. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry if I went way off left field. And I also, again, want to say thank you to Ms. Norgard and to Mr. Reed, because your voices are really, really needed. And I'm glad that we all had the opportunity today to hear your words.
Thanks, Jesse. I would say you did not go off into left field. I would say you nailed it. And I really appreciate you being here, and we're very grateful to all of you. I think the first one out of the box with a question was Deb, who recognized about 2 minutes in that she was going to have a question. So Deb, take it away.
Okay, cool. I'm unmuted myself. So this is for both Ron and the gentleman from Cow Creek, whose name I'm totally spacing off.
Jesse Jackson.
So, being from where I'm from on the Central Coast, we get a lot of those requests from the Western scientists and the land scientists to share our knowledge. And when does sharing end and appropriation begin with you guys, and how are you guarding against it?
I'm happy to answer first, but I'll defer to Mr. Reed. I also was retyping my name while you asked your question.
Oh.
So I'd prefer Mr. Reed to go first, because then I'll probably deduce what the question was.
Well, you know,
Uncle Ron, yes.
yeah, Uncle Ron says that's not an easy question.
No.
Because quite frankly, I think I had a conversation with Dave on this whole, when this process, when I got the invitation, it was like, hey, I'm unemployed. And, it's kind of like that's, I'm talking about well, actually, I'm unemployed, but I'm contracted with the Kuduk tribe. So that kind of allows me to kind of like to co-produce the knowledge with the tribe and with my family. But it's not enough. It's not enough because the federal government, our tribal government is the arm of the federal government, and there's a restriction of management that you can do. So at some point, you got to sit there and kind of like, I got to, you feel like you're sharing and you're giving knowledge out there. Like, I feel like I'm doing that today. I feel like I do that every meeting. So I'm sharing things to other people that aren't my people, and they need it just as well. But I'm looking at the big picture to say that this has to happen so public persona can change, so we can have that structure available to our people. So I think that's really where we're at, that we got to keep fighting and finding a way, and then utilizing the other aisle, the Western science aisle, for me, instead of like just giving all my knowledge, just figure out the political power pressure points and work that way. And I think that has really gained momentum over the years of what is the issue and come back from it, rather than me just throwing everything at the problem and then trying to figure it out. So I think it's evolving enough to where we can start focusing on the issue generally.
And by the way, Dr. Carey is also on this call just via voice. So if any of you have any questions for her, she's available as well.
Deb, do you mind re-asking the question?
Because I'm from the Central Coast and we get a lot of questions. We have Western scientists and anthropologists and Forest Service, and they all want us to give our perspective on things like land stewardship, water stewardship, plants even. And I forgot, Uncle Ron, my mother and grandmother talked with an associate at Mission San Antonio, because we're Mission Indians, about plants. And next thing we knew, he wrote a book and he made the money off the book. And, we didn't have anything but a thank you for helping me make money off my book. So the question is when does sharing become appropriation, and how can Native people make sure that sharing doesn't turn out to be something that someone else takes the credit for and then we're left out in the cold? And me being a journalist, I want to make sure that I'm not part of the problem. So that's my question.
Okay, yeah. So I want to say, I think Ron answered that great. First, I got to acknowledge we didn't create the problem. So it's not on all us to fix it. I'm going to really simply answer that. The path forward can only be through inclusion, right? On every level. And there shan't be a time where there's too much inclusion, but there sure are a lot of times where there's not enough. Right? And I said what I said before. I believe that we're putting a lot of band-aids on things that at the end of the day are going to, when we get smart, mirror identically what the people here for thousands of years came to. So we didn't make the game, and we don't control the rules of the game. So it's not really, we don't even have an opportunity to fix it. All we do is continue to say the same thing that our grandfathers and grandmothers have said for many years.
Thousands of years.
And hope that someone will finally wake up. In the case of fire, I don't think it's because we're all right that this is, that our voices are being heard. Unfortunately, I think it's because of the failed management of the lands, and because a lot of white people are breathing smoke, people are saying, you know what? Maybe white people was a strong word. Non-natives are out there breathing smoke, and they're like, man, we should do something about this. And so finally, the conservative county commissioners in my county are like, man, that sounds like something. Well, then the talk begins, right? But boy, we're still way behind where we need to be and where we're going to be. So, I guess I try not to get too cynical. I try to see where we're at and wake up, try to do our best every day. But the Native community didn't create this problem. And when the settlers came over here and saw this awesome environment that was so great, look at David Douglas, the famous botanist, when he came over here. He loved Oregon when he came down the Columbia River and came down to our territory. Like, yeah, I loved it, And so everybody started taking advantage of it and going at its natural resources and taking from it with no connection and no connection and no management, right? No real true love. And so it didn't take very long for him to take a lot and for it to get real unhealthy. And it was that has forced us now. So I don't want to romanticize this. I don't think we're at the table talking about fire because everybody realized that the indigenous people had their shit together. I think it's more because we're having some problems that no one has an answer to.
There's not an indigenous knowledge economic model.
Right.
So I've been going to all these different meetings, Northwest Forest Plan, every Forest Service meeting, we're teaching them. They're scribbling down notes and doing things differently. in order for me to get the knowledge from Western Science, I got to pretty much mortgage the future to go get that degree. But they're coming in and using this knowledge right here with a stipend, with this and that. So there needs to be an economic structure, with equities, economic equities involved. I worked for 20 years with the tribe. 2001 to 2006, I was put on there as a tribal lead for the hydroelectric licensing. Every other year, we had to scramble around and look for money for my job, identifying impacts to our culture. That problem still exists today.
All
Thank-
for nothing. After they messed it up, they come to us for answers, but they don't want to pay us. Anyways, I'll get off my
Yeah.
soapbox now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Ron, and thanks, Jesse. And by the way, Jesse, Deb was right when she said you're more than welcome to say white when that's what you mean. Or you're in a safe place here.
I gotta say, I am an anthropology major. I'm a registered, but man, I'm a lover of Homo sapiens sapien. I gotta say that for everybody on here. So I operate on the 4.6 billion year geologic time frame. So we all have a spot.
Fair enough.
And I'm still, I don't try to step on toes when we talk about time immemorial and stuff because I want to be respectful. But I'm an inclusion guy, and our only path forward is together. Whoever put Johanna Miyake in there, I'm so glad you heard that because that's what I'm talking about. Not only are feds coming at you for something like fire, but we might get to points where it's like, oh, the way that indigenous people were living together and treating each other was pretty good too. Maybe we'll start looking at the sociological aspects of these guys.
Yep. All right. Thanks. Robin has a question.
I thought originally this would be for Ron, but now I think it's for Jesse also. And so I'd like to hear from either or both of you a little bit more about how good fire makes water or how you think about that.
Ron, I know that you're really well versed, so I'm going to go really short on this one. I'm going to give some just really clear examples. You guys know what riparian zones are, right? Our healthy areas, well, hopefully healthy next to our creeks and rivers and ephemeral streams and waterways. And I'm an education guy, but I'm not in natural resources. So my knowledge is through what I've picked up and from my grandfather and just, but you cannot name a landscape in my neck of the woods. Riparian zone, top of a mountain. There's no place that will be worst for burning. And there are specific plants that live in those riparian zones that are really important for our water. That's why they're there. So for me, one of the ones that comes to mind is the red alder tree. I was taught when I was in 7th grade, if you ever go up to the alder tree and you dig up them roots, you're going to find nitrogen producing nodules on there, right? A lot of other stuff chokes out our alders. And if we're not burning in there, then we don't have alders, then we don't have them producing the liquid nitrogen in there that many other plants utilize. So one little tiny specific example of how burning can really help water. But boy, when we talk about our creeks and our bigger waterways, they're all dependent on our smaller waterways, of course. And so all of those I'm from up in the mountains. And so the healthiness that gets into those areas when it burns and the natural environment that come back, specifically the flora that comes back that's supposed to be there, that's healthy, end up doing things like provide the grasses that provide shade over our little creeks and the trees that are supposed to be there with the canopy to do that. So water temperature is a lot lower. When you get up into where I live on Elk Creek, which is deemed by some of our watershed folks as the single most important feeder to the South Umpqua River. And there are other creeks that come in higher than us that have more flow, but their temperatures are higher. And so Elk Creek has the best habitat for all of our andromynous species, our lamprey, all of our steelhead, all our salmons that come up. So endless amounts of specific examples, and I'm sure Ron can go into more micro and macro, but you know, there's nothing worse than going up to a choked creek that has a bunch of non-native stuff growing around it that's really hot, and you see a bunch of squawfish in it. That's just death to my soul.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I'll just say indigenous hydrology is the indigenous lifestyle. So we put good fire on the landscape where all our medicinal resources, our food, our connectivity up in the high country, fire periodicity, basketry materials every 2 to 3 years, acorn trees every 7 years. And so what you do is you go in and burn, and then the fir tree, if left unmanaged, the fir trees encroach, and they have the taproot that goes down, and then it takes place of the grasses. The grasses have like a sponge root system that it absorbs all the water that comes down. The tap roots, the water runs off. Hence, if you don't have that, then you're not re-emitting water at the proper time of the year when it's hot and the fish need water. So what you're doing is you're with this indigenous fire, you're burning out all the brushy materials underneath all your trees that provide these medicines and fruits, you know. And then when you don't do that, bugs come back and they infest the trees. When you burn, the smoke drives them out. You know, so, and then probably the most important thing for our terrestrial animals is like the 7-year fire periodicity for them. Anything after 7 years, the food becomes fiber, it becomes wood, non-nutritious. So now you're not only impacting the resources that humans need, but you're also impacting the resources that our non-human relations need to provide sustainable life over time for us. So that's about the most simplest way I can put it, is that indigenous fire is not crept out to the whole landscape, like, you know, where it's overwhelming. It's to the acorn trees, it's to all these different places, and then creating a fire resiliency that allows cultural people to have the same social resiliency. Without fire, that resiliency is suffocated.
If I could tag along on that, Ron's really touching on something really important. I think most people can understand, if you think about Western civilization, Roman Empire, Greeks, and before, how many of those people lived in a non-digital environment and knew the sky and studied the stars. Maybe you know about the 5 main shipbuilders, and you know European history, right? Spanish, English, French, Dutch, and the Portuguese. So all of those guys navigated off the stars, and we all know how much knowledge we don't have today and how much they had back then. I'm telling you, that's pale in comparison to the fire knowledge that indigenous people had. He's absolutely right. In, you know, for our areas, our children by the age of 8 would have had more fire knowledge than almost any people that are alive today. They were that intimate with it. So very specific. Some areas where we have weaving plants, like say hazelnut or some of the other high mountain ones we burn every couple of years. Some it might be every 3 or 4 years. We have areas that we burn every 5 to 10 years. We have some areas that do burn almost every year, or definitely every 2 years. But yeah, when we talk about fire back on the landscape, I think some people think it's like, we haven't allowed fire forever, and now let's burn everything down at the right time. And it is so much more of a prescription than that. And that's another testimony of the knowledge that we are still revitalizing, and some have more than others. But yeah, the ways that we burned our landscape and the timing that we burned our landscape were really specific prescriptions that had evolved over a very long time. And just like those people in the past had mass knowledge of the skies to be able to navigate, our people had mass knowledge of fire through our relationship with it. I hope I said that right, Ron.
Thank you both. Chris, I skipped you earlier, so go ahead.
Oh, great. First of all, thank you so much. You guys are, all of you are just so touching and powerful, and learning a lot. I'm on the East Coast, and what our tribes in Virginia are facing is climate change. Many of them are on tributary or on rivers or on the coastline with brackish water that are totally being affected. We are seeing ghost forests really impact their ability to hunt and fish and things like that. And I wonder, as I'm listening to you all just talk so powerfully about the importance of indigenous knowledge and what we can glean from that. As a journalist, as a non-native journalist, and wanting to make sure that that I'm doing my due diligence in sharing this, first of all, climate change is very new. Honestly, it's on the human spectrum of time. We've never seen anything like this, and I'm wondering, in the Native communities, how are you talking and thinking about solutions to climate change, and what can we as journalists take away from that and share, do you think?
I think it's just all, really about opportunity. I mean, I just drove blank. Jesse, you want to? I'm sorry, I just lost my point.
It's all good. I'm with you. Maybe we're riding the same wave. It is all about opportunity, and it's an opportunity. I wrote down a prescription. You can carry this back to the people. I don't think this is as specific as it should be, but it's a macro place to start. I wrote down these 3 things in this order: ceremony, burning, beaver. Those 3. Just hearing what you just said, that before anything happens there, people need to go and make a connection. If it was the Indian way, we wouldn't just go and say, hey, what's the problem? And we need to start fixing this. That's the type of mindset that allows the problem to just be back there on Tuesday and you're back there fixing it again. So for me, you want to really have those people be helping their environment. You have native and non-native local community bringing ceremony back to that land, establishing their visceral connection and their promise to that land. It starts there. Remember, it starts with the connection. Then you start doing things like burning at the right time and bringing fire back to the landscape and trying to return those healthy plant foods and plant medicines that Mr. Reed keeps talking about. Not going to hurt the environment. And then I'm a big beaver advocate. I help our local beaver guys. Beaver's one of those indicator species. There's lots of, if you guys haven't seen all of the awesomeness that's happening on Earth when people bring back beavers to the environments that you described, to help in those riparian zones begin the first greenery and all the life that spreads out from that animal that we still don't know that much about. So that's where I start. And I know it's much bigger than that. But
could you ask that real quick again? Could you ask that question real quick?
Well, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's more of a question or a statement or just a really horrible feeling I have about where we're at in time and what we need to do to fix the issues that we're seeing. And if it's indigenous knowledge that could be a key to unraveling the feedback loops that we're finding, that we're seeing, and they're growing.
Yeah. Thank you. Knowledge is power. I think that we can't do it with the indigenous knowledge that we have. Western science cannot do it, and that's heal things and make things good again without indigenous knowledge. So to me, and I get a lot of pushback on this, I put a lot of stock in academia. I'm trying to change the way people think, the public opinion, and it's working. All the different places I've lectured at, I'm going talking, the community's growing. And now indigenous fire isn't something that people are laughing about, much like the dams on the Klamath River. They need to come out because for the first time, I think the people sitting on the fence in society have been able to hear indigenous knowledge and what technical sense does that make. And now they're able to weigh to their own conclusions of what's best for the community. So I think it's just a matter of opportunity and allowing the next generation to take responsibility. My children are doing that, and now they're going to be putting Western science as an asterisk above our management plan with a Western science just the opposite of the way I grew up. So it's about opportunity, and it's about people sitting on the fence being able to understand what's best for the greater community. And I think that's what you folks are all about.
Hi, this is
That's what-
Kari. This is Kari. I don't know if you can hear me well enough or if I should even try to add to this.
Good.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just also want to say it's been profound to listen to the words that both Jesse and Ron have been sharing. What I hear in this question as a non-Indigenous person is something, again, that speaks back to, and Jesse put it so well, it's not just that Native people were burning, but they were treating each other really well too. And this idea that I highlighted or tried to highlight about Kreduk social management. And in following the dam removal process on the Klamath early on, it struck me that the ways that people were motivated, the sense of responsibility and ethic of responsibility, and the ways that people were not gauging whether or not they were going to try based on whether or not they thought they would succeed, but just that it was the right thing to do, is such an important stance. And I think that for non-Indigenous peoples, I mean, all of us are very alienated from the natural world. We're very cut off. We've cut off our hearts in many ways too. And I think for those of us, I think it's not just about what do we need to do to the ecology, what needs to happen there, but it's the healing that has to happen for non-Native people to really stand up and be present with what's going on and decide to fight, even if, and try to do their best, just as as Indigenous peoples I've observed to do. So I don't know if that's helpful, but as a sociologist who studies social movements, as someone who's thought about climate change and climate change denial, that's the piece I have, and I apologize for that background audio as well. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. Maura has a question.
Hi, I just I kind of want to start by acknowledging how much work I think Indigenous communities have been doing to change the narrative around fire, and just this very long-standing completely sort of backwards scientific, and I think from a policy perspective, like understanding of all fire is bad, and how amazing it is that how far you have been pushing that conversation and forcing it into the public discussion and expanding people's awareness of different types of fire and the importance of fire. And also that the media has really played a role in sort of perpetuating a very narrow understanding of fire ecology. So my question then is, what do you think the media is still kind of getting wrong about fire and fire ecology, or current issues? Like, where are our blind spots, and where do you see the conversation kind of needing to go from here, and in our coverage of the issue?
That is a really, really tough question. I think we're kind of identifying that, although we are, and appreciate how much TEK and Indigenous knowledge is being talked about, it's not an equal sign. It's not an equal sign. I value it a little bit more, but in this society, it's like you're being you're the special guest at the table, but you're still the special guest. You're not an equal. You're not there every single day. And so I personally feel like that media should be concentrating on the governing entities that really are controlling the flow at which we move forward. That's how I personally feel. So if someone from the Forest Service, or if someone from a governmental agency, and sorry, I said that one's any of them, if someone comes on and says some words that appeases some people here, but their policy's still not supporting people moving forward, then that's an issue. And I think that's kind of where we're at. I think we have a lot of people knowing what to say and starting to make legislative and policy changes, but the talk is happening faster than the action. And And it will be a travesty if this is a point in time where something else becomes popular and then the talk goes away and then there is no action and then there's no push for it. So for me, I feel like media continuing to be listening to the arena and then hearing those words and really asking the tough questions to the people in power, that's probably our path of least resistance forward. And then anything other than that, it's just it's people coming together to have feel good scenarios that really aren't kind of pushing any agenda forward. That's how I personally feel, and I'm sorry if that comes off bad or wrong or that hurts anybody's feelings, but that's how I personally feel. I have a unique perspective from a very rural area in Southern Oregon. I graduated with 16 kids, 5 were foreign exchange students, so like I come from really small area. So my perspective is based on the most rural area along the I-5 corridor in Oregon.
I remember when I first come aboard in the management world, I was pretty indigenous green behind the ears. And, I used to talk from my heart, but I didn't have the vocabulary that I have now. And I remember them guys telling me, well, you have a case study or you have, all the different things that prove the validity of your work. And so now, of course, I didn't have a stupid case study. This is history that was erased by America, right? So with that being said, because there's no history of indigenous people in America, yeah, there's the stereotypical, right? I learned that in my public school system. I learned about, the Three Sisters, the squash and everything like that. I learned about the corn. I learned about everything, but they didn't teach me about the world renewal on the Klamath River. Okay. So there's a huge impact on that knowledge situation, that knowledge train. And I think that's the embeddedness of what we're talking about right now. The lack of history. You don't even know what we're talking about. So I spend all of my bandwidth explaining who we are and what we do. And then once you fill up your notepad, you say, if you're a manager, you fill up your notepad, now you have a lot of ideas to go back to the drawing board to kind of address some of the issues that the Native American community.
Well, Ron,
It almost creates a.
Sorry, go ahead.
And so I guess, so anyway, with all that being said, I believe there needs to be a social, academic, and a management roundtable that needs to occur to kind of like get at some of these, the hard questions, the harder questions. But I think we get there by more of an investigative reporting exercise to create these case studies. Because once we start doing this investigative reporting, we're going to start being able to group these folks into regions that kind of basically utilize the same ideology, indigenous ideology in these regions. So that's my kind of feeling, is that we're not totally understood, and I have to go to academia to get understood. By then, management are taking another step, but if we bring management in as well. So politics, but I think it's just yeah, I'm not even sure what I just said.
Thank you, Ron. Well, we've reached the end of our time here, folks. So I just want to again express our profound gratitude to both Ron and Jesse and Kari for being here for this last hour and a half and sharing this so powerful and emotional. I mean, it was so knowledge and emotion and everything. I mean, this to me was just an amazing way to finish this entire workshop off. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for being here. And yeah, so we do a little thing here where we do this little golf clap where you can see all of us expressing our gratitude. And yeah, journalists, you did it. You guys were great. asked a lot of good questions. You dug in, and we appreciate that too. So, yeah. Anything else we need to add here, Adam?
Well, I would just echo what you said, Ron and Jesse and Kari. This would have been a pretty bad session without you guys here. You really were inspiring and engaging, and we appreciate that. And I know that we ask you to do a lot of work, but hopefully we're able to learn and then share that wider and make it a little less work next time around. And I hope that we get to your parts of the world again sometime soon with another bus full of journalists. It'd be great to see you both again. And to all of our journalists, yeah, there's no great way to end these virtual sessions. If you were in person, we'd treat you to the closing dinner and highly emotional award ceremony, but we don't have any of those lined up. We need to let you get your eyeballs away from a computer screen. It was great to spend a couple of days with you, though. Please follow up with any questions, comments, anything. We're here and available. And I am about to hit send on the email that has the roster of speakers and their contact information so that you can ask all the questions you didn't get to ask and ones you just thought of. So good luck with all of your reporting. Thank you for the work you guys all do too. We're big fans of journalists and we will always be. So we appreciate you guys.
I would just like to say that this isn't the end all. I did this for the future. I believe that, you know, you guys are so important to the narrative. And I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't really think, honestly, that somebody's going to come be knocking on my email door to kind of like to fulfill some of these questions that you have in some of the worlds that you live in. Because we do have the answer for our world, but we have answers for the other parts of the world too, because there's indigenous knowledge that encompasses this globe. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you all again somewhere sometime soon.
Same, Ron. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Suvanik.
Nice meeting you, Jess.
Yep, Suvanik.
Suvanik. Thank you, Kari. Suvanik all.
Take care, everybody.